I'm Douglas, and this is my 12th practice speech. Being a world superpower is a tough job, right? And the US probably knows that better than anyone. We have gained a reputation for being the first to swoop in and solve a problem, and give any assistance to a country that needs it, whether or not they ask for it, and whether or not it is in our best interest. If a nation needs our help in cases of genocide or state-sponsored terrorism, I think we have an obligation to help these nations out. But that is not to say that I believe that intervention is always in the United States' best interest, nor do I believe that it is always in the United States' best interest. Today I'm going to discuss with you all why I believe that intervention is not always in the United States' best interest. By exploring the toll intervention takes on the economy, and the need for the U.S. to focus on itself, I will give you a rounded view of why I believe the way I do. So let's begin with our first main point, which is that it takes a toll on the economy. The economy takes a great hit when the U.S. chooses to intervene in the country. Using an article about the cost of military intervention in Syria to taxpayers, written by Bryce Covert for ThinkProgress.com, we can get an example of just about the average costs of intervention that we have to face always. The popular method of cruise missile strikes causes hundreds of millions of dollars. $340 million alone just going to munitions. Some of the attack missiles that the U.S. can use cost in itself $1.4 million each. The cost of Navy vessels itself is estimated about $25 million per week for upkeep, and if the U.S. were to fire missiles and engage in combat with other countries, then we would add an additional $30 million of cost. And additionally, if we actually put boots on the ground, the cost goes up to billions of dollars, costing up to $300 billion a year, and required thousands and thousands of troops depending on the size of the intervention process. In a nation with a $17,775 trillion deficit, a stat from the Washington Times, can we really afford to dig ourselves in a deeper hole and continue giving out money that we don't have? Next, we will discuss that the U.S. needs to focus in on itself. Plainly put, the U.S. is losing traction as a superpower. According to the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD, we rank 17th in the world in science scores, 25th in math. We rank 12th among developed countries in college graduation, down from number 1 where we have been for several decades. We come in 79th in elementary school enrollments, and our infrastructure is ranked 23rd in the world, well behind every other major industrialized nation. American health numbers, based on studies done by the OECD and the World Health Organization, rank us 27th in life expectancy, 18th in diabetes, and number 1 in obesity ratings. Of course, there are some areas in which we are number 1, but most of those areas aren't ones that you'd want to brag about. Like I said, we're number 1 in obesity rankings, but we also have the most guns. We have the most crime numbers of any rich industrialized country. And of course, we have by far the biggest debt in the world. These numbers are bad because as our status declines, so does our credibility as a world superpower. And it's not just about the power that we have over other nations. It also depends on the power that we have to make decisions that affect the world. As we become more globalized, the necessity for leaders to make decisions becomes of paramount importance. And if the U.S. continues to lose its ranking, so will our opinions lose their importance. By the U.S. focusing more inward and creating improvement in the country, I believe that we can begin to get on the right side of those rankings. So, to summarize my presentation for today, my purpose today was not to make you believe that intervention is never something that the U.S. should consider, but rather to make you believe that possibly intervention should not always be our first or our best option when dealing with foreign policy matters. I hope my speech was able to offer some insight into why intervention is not always the U.S.'s best interest. We have discussed the effects it takes on our economy, upwards of billions of dollars, typically per invasion strategy, and the U.S.'s need to focus on itself by getting back into the top rankings compared to other countries. A quote by Benjamin A. Valentino, a writer for the Foreign Affairs Journal, said the following about intervention not always being in the U.S. interest. This does not mean that the United States should stop trying to promote its values abroad, even when its national security is not at risk. It is just looking for a different strategy. Washington should replace its focus on military interventions with a humanitarian foreign policy centered on saving lives by funding a public health program in developing worlds, aiding victims of natural disasters, and assisting refugees and people fleeing from war from violent countries. Thank you.